What's happening, everybody? That's my good pal, Laurie Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. This is the NFL Brekkie Show. Laws, we're down to the last 8. And you blink, we have 7 games left in the NFL season in total, Super Bowl included. Uh, Some would call this weekend the best weekend of the year in the NFL. I mean, it's 96 hours away, less than that. I'll be on the field freezing my butt off at Arrowhead for Chiefs Texans, all 4 games on ESPN. So much to discuss today.
It is, I think there's a lot of hope that is the best weekend of football because, look, love playoff football, love postseason, love the storylines, but that was a blowout-heavy wildcard weekend that we just went through. Let's not sugarcoat it. You know, there were 2 games where there were heavily backed favorites. Those are the only 2 games. I'm going to put up hand up accountability. I had a shocker. I went 2 for 6 this weekend. Those are the only 2 I got right. The Ravens manhandling the Steelers and your Broncos taking a predictable step into the offseason at the hands of the dominant Buffalo Bills. But there were 4.5 blowouts, what we say. I mean, the Eagles-Packers was close-ish on. It was 2 scores, not a huge blowout, but the way that the Packers were struggling to move the ball and the injuries that piled up, Elton Jenkins, Christian Watson was already out, and then we see the injury to Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs as well. I mean, it really did start to pile on, and that one started to feel pretty predictable. Really, the tense, close one was the Commanders and Buccaneers, and I know we'll get into that because I got some thoughts on some football cliches involving holding on to the football that we might touch on in a little bit. But I think when you have such a heavily weighted slate in terms of the margin of victory, it's easy to point at, okay, well, clearly these teams are moving on. There's not a lot of drama in the late games to go over here. So who are the real losers, Phil? That's the question. We've seen the Real Housewives of this. We've seen the real this. And, pick your state, pick your entity. For us, we're presenting the real losers of Wild Card Weekend, looking at some narratives, looking at some football powers or fading powers that took a big hit just beyond the scoreboard over what was, as I mentioned, a heavy defeat, heavy Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah, Laz, and I mean, for you, anybody who's viewing, send us your real losers of Wild Card Weekend. We had 6 teams whose seasons have ended in the last 72 hours or so, and starting to digest the offseason. I mean, Mike Tomlin stepped to the mic today and chatted for 35 minutes about, I hate having this conversation at this time of year again. I'd much rather be preparing for a game. But that is the reality for 6 franchises, whether it was somewhat expected from the outside, like I just mentioned the Steelers, or you mentioned the Broncos, I think accurately. I mean, there was budding hope in Mile High that they would spring the upset. And there were moments, I mean, if that field goal goes in, a toenail goes down on the 4th down catch. Listen, Denver needed every bounce to go their way. And then 2, in that middle 8 minutes didn't. And then Buffalo is just an avalanche. And it sets up a very intriguing, very exciting game this weekend for them. But Laz, we have our real losers of Wild Card Weekend. And you and I chatted on the phone yesterday, and as we kind of conceptualized this, and I think the one that's most fresh is probably Sam Darnold. And at large, I mean, it is the Minnesota Vikings. If we rewound 2 weeks ago and we were talking about Detroit's decimated defense and that Week 18 game for the 1 seed, Minnesota trying to get the 1 seed in Detroit and seeming to have all the momentum and a lot of people backing them to do so. And that's right about the time a lot of the NFL draft content on ESPN.com started to come out. And Mel Kiper, I think, did a terrific job of breaking down the favorable position in which Minnesota found themselves, in that they have a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who they drafted last year in the 1st round in the top 10, who, if he would have come out in this year's class, the grade he got last year is higher than any quarterback in this class, Deion Sanders, Cam Ward at the top. J.J. McCarthy would be the likely number 1 overall pick, first player off the board. Minnesota still has him under control and at a cheaper dollar amount than you would get for a number 1 pick because they drafted him, 9th overall, 10th overall, wherever they got him. And so that's an asset that if Minnesota were keen to keep Sam Darnold and say, hey, this Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold marriage is working, the Vikings, who have 3 picks total in the upcoming draft, they have their 1st round pick, which is now going to be in the low 20s, and they have 2 5th round picks. That's it. They don't pick between 20 and like 150. I mean, it's a gap. So they could trade J.J. McCarthy for probably a 1 and multiple day 2 picks in this year's draft and really bolster a core around Sam Darnold, or they could tag Darnold and a team would need to give them 2 firsts to sign him, and they get 1 more year of him, allow JJ McCarthy to heal up from a torn meniscus and develop. And it seemed like every proposition was a win-win. And then we would be sitting here for the next 3 months and say, which is the bigger win? Well, Sam Darnold goes out, and much like he did in week 7 and 8, coincidentally, losing back-to-back to the Lions and the Rams, but this time it's week 18, losing to the Lions, losing to the Rams, and far more decidedly so. 9 points per game in these 2 games. Off-target throws, 13 against Detroit, 10 against the Rams in that game yesterday. QBR dipped hard. A guy who had lived on passes of 20-plus air yards. He had 1 such completion last week, 1 such completion in yesterday's game. Took 82 yards worth of sacks. Troy Aikman was talking about on the broadcast how Darnold, during their meeting during the week, was talking about tinkering his mechanics. And Troy saying that's kind of unbecoming of a confident playoff quarterback. And you and I saw in that first drive when Matt Stafford took the Rams right down the field, and what I will tell you was not friendly confines for LA. That was as close as you can get to a Vikings home game as you would get outside the state of Minnesota. The confident, controlled quarterback play that Matt Stafford offered, albeit in an imperfect performance. I mean, the Rams didn't light it up. They didn't even get to 300 total yards. They had 10 accepted penalties. But the fact that game was never competitive, now the Vikings are in a really tough spot because I don't think they can justify $40+ million a year to Sam Darnold in any kind of long-term commitment. Seeing what we saw against 2 contending opponents, but you also you can't. You're just going to get nothing if he walks out the door, and now you're left kind of resetting, going to a rookie quarterback next year's coming off a knee injury and 0 draft capital. So Sam Darnold, I think, was a big loser of Wild Card weekend because it was doubly affirmed what we saw a week ago. And then the Vikings as a whole, because they went from within 15 days, this incredibly favorable position with 2 quarterbacks, to now having to go all in on one or the other without, I think, much confidence.
Yeah, this was a game where don't just look at it where Sam Darnold was today. Or where Sam Darnold was a week ago. It's where he could have been a week from now with a playoff victory. And for someone like him who, it's not fair, but that quote about seeing ghosts is going to follow him for the entirety of his career. And that those stigmas and those ideas stick with a scouting portfolio and now a pro scouting portfolio throughout a veteran's career. He's the last quarterback that could afford to have that type of moment. And it does drop you from, say, he wins a playoff game, shows out in a big spot against a tough opponent, against a seasoned playoff opponent. Now we're talking at that $40+, $45 million plus a year. Yeah. And with that
Brock Purdy's about to sign for 58.
The names that we're talking about in comparison to Sam Darnold, most often Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield in terms of the contract, in terms of, is he going to surpass that mid-tier starter contract and go up in towards more of that franchise money? Well, Geno Smith is $25 million a year. It's a bit of an older deal compared to Baker Mayfield, who's in that kind of low 30s. And 30 is $300 million. You can jump around with the different kind of guarantees, but in that low 30s is those quarterbacks. They had their struggles. Obviously, they had knocked off their perch from where they were invested in their original teams, but there's a stigma that has stuck with Sam Darnold that exceeds what those 2 players were dealing with. And we've seen with Baker Mayfield getting paid after a playoff victory, after some success in the postseason. There feels like the bottom could fall out for Sam Darnold's market quicker and more dramatically just because of that perception that does exist and the serious doubts that feel like they were affirmed in the past 2 weeks that in the biggest games, can Sam Darnold hold up to pressure? Anytime you're breaking a record that dates back to the Ice Bowl, I mean, nice to share a record with a fellow NFC North legend in Bart Starr, but anytime you're setting sack yardage playoff records, not a good thing.
Go the wrong way.
I agree with Sam Darnold there. So I'm looking at my next biggest losers, and I'm going to throw an interesting flag out in the field, Phil. I've just been notified by an internet browser that I will be fielding a forcible restart in 35 minutes time. So we officially have a total show run time of 42 and a half minutes today, which puts us in a 2-minute drill right off the bat. But that's the type of adaptability that we're looking for in the pocket. Perhaps not what we saw from the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell yesterday. Okay, my next big loser. Mike Tomlin as a walk-around head coach, because does he ever walk around to the offensive side of the ball? Philip, the offensive coordinators since 2012, and that's it. It is this decade plus that we're looking at the ridiculous amount of playoff failure that the Steelers, this model of consistency, the bastion of consistency, winning records, non-losing records as well in the NFL. Here are your offensive coordinators, Haley Fitchner, Canada, and Arthur Smith. Where's the revolutionary thinking? Where's the aggression? You cannot. Mike Tomlin, you and me go back. We had a little exchange on social, and we talk about it. Like, massive reverence to Mike Tomlin. He would have jobs if he was ever let go by the Steelers in an instant. I'm not sure he'd last 24 hours on the open market before being snapped up. But something has to shake up and change in terms of how he approaches offensive football. The Arthur Smith signing, some people praised it because he was a better OC than he was in head coach, and you could see how, the heavy play action and the emphasis on the run game, how it melds into Steelers football. But we don't need that anymore. We don't need that. You still need to run the ball. You still need to play tough football. You still need to be tough in the trenches. They reinvested in the trenches. This has been a year of revival for the running back and the running game in general. But the Steelers, out of all franchises, need to show some offensive flexibility because it's been stale for so long. Their inability to address the quarterback position, yes, they're always picking in the 20s, I understand, but some level of more creativity. The draft that they chose to actually take a swing on Kenny Pickett was the most blinking red light draft of there's no quarterback answers here for you. I am so frustrated, and I'm not an invested Steelers fan. Have a look at the jacket that I'm wearing today. But for someone like Mike Tomlin, who is so respected, revered, game planning has never been something or readiness or the details has never been something that he has been criticized. But as someone who sits at the top in that presidential role as the head coach of the Steelers, we need more innovation and just a willingness to change things on offense and get away from some really dated, archaic, cliched views of Steelers football.
And Laz, I think he admitted as much in his media availability today. I read the transcript. It was only, 5 hours ago. And a lot of questions about the quarterback position. They have no quarterbacks under contract right now, 1, 2, and 3, namely the top two, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both free agents. And offensive philosophy was questioned by reporters. I mean, Tomlin started it on a 4-minute, basically monologue, just laying out the failures of the team. And I mean, he didn't get into too many specifics, but then the reporters probed with specifics, and he stood up there for 30 minutes and fielded questions. And at some point he said, hey, the fact that we're talking about quarterback again, and we're talking about offensive philosophy again, those need to be considered and addressed. And for me, it was more of a defense of Mike Tomlin, because when the Steelers lost a game that nobody really expected them to win, just given the roster. I mean, you and I sit here every August and we say, all right, this has got to be the year the Steelers have a losing record. Like this Tomlin streak of winning records, it's going to end this season. And sure enough, man, what the ingredients he has, turning chicken you-know-what into chicken salad every year, 9 wins, 10 wins, and they got beaten by a superior team in the playoffs. Like, most coaches would have gone 6-11 with that roster. They wouldn't have made it to the playoffs to have. There's a reason that they just set a dubious NFL record, 80 wins over 8 seasons without a playoff win. No team's ever done that before. No team's been within 3 of them. And all of those teams that are even closer in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when there was a higher threshold to make the playoffs. So usually you had to get more wins to get there and you were a stronger team. What they're doing is really an anomaly. And you can go through the list of offensive coordinators. I mean, I mentioned this, the starting quarterbacks since Twilight Ben Roethlisberger. The 2017 playoff loss to the Jags was a bad loss. Coaches have bad losses. But since then, he's cobbling together playoff runs with Mason Rudolph and Twilight Ben Roethlisberger and Duck Hodges and Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, guys who are okay NFL quarterbacks, but they stand toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson, who's having an MVP caliber season, but potentially an MVP winning season. You're never going to win. But then what I don't understand is how we go from, all right, Steelers probably going to lose this game by 10 to 14 points, and they lose by 14 points. Like, we need to start talking about Mike Tomlin's job. I mean, there are 27 NFL franchises today that would say, please talk about his job. Please fire him so we can sign him and have him lead our team. But there is an onus in defense of your point. to get a more advanced offensive mind as an offensive coordinator so that it's not three-step drop moonball. It was actually working in the second half. I mean, Russell Wilson in the second half on passes of 20-plus air yards, 5 for 6, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was beating them deep, but it was just this like slog of a first half where they were down 21-7 against the Ravens. And the Ravens looked fine because they were running the ball so well, but that wasn't this incendiary, we're going to overwhelm you like we've seen the Lions do when they were at their healthiest this season. So if I'm Pittsburgh, there's got to be a change at OC. And if there's not, at some point it does fall on Mike Tomlin, but I don't think you can use a playoff losing streak against him when 5 of the 6 playoff runs that were one and done, they had no business being in the postseason. They were a 5 to 7 win roster that he just found a way to cobble together 10 wins like he always seems to do. You get a semi-capable quarterback under center there and a semi-capable offensive coordinator, keep Mike Tomlin. Then this team's back to 11 wins, 12 wins, and perhaps making some noise in the playoffs.
Again, for me, it really is. It's not about, there's a lot of people questioning his job. I'm just questioning where the emphasis is as he's doing his job. He should be the Steelers head coach, but that organizational emphasis on creating something on offense beyond what we've seen the past decade since Ben Roethlisberger started to fade is absolutely pivotal. We've got a quick one here. Brad Bulk, good morning, gents. Phil, love the hat. Where can we get one to support the LAFD? Salute there.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where I can get this hat. I'll be straight up. This is, I think I'm within policy. The Rams had given a few of us on the sideline this exact cap, but there are fundraisers for hats and LA Strong t-shirts that the NFL's put on. I don't know if they ship internationally. I hope they do. That'd be amazing if they did, especially because of the relationship between the Rams franchise and Australia. Friend of the show, Torrey Holt, was on the sideline last night, shaking some hands, signing some autographs with some fans pre-game. But yeah, the Rams are doing fundraisers there, but this is more just a shout out to LAFD, who are doing a terrific job in and around Los Angeles.
Yeah, friend of the show, Kobe Turner having a massive game. Friend of the show, Steve Avila, also a big fan of Australia, and not a bad Australian accent, known to use the term razor blades to get his accent sharpened. Okay, next one that we've got listed here. Phil, I know what colors I'm wearing today. Would you like to pick one of your big losers as we now count down to, we have 27 minutes left, 26 minutes left on the clock.
Okay. Well, mine is the Cowboys, and it's kind of funny. Even when they're not playing in Wildcard weekend, they're losing Wildcard weekend. And this is the stat now, Laws. 2025 will be the 30th anniversary of them having not made a conference championship game. So not being in the last 4 of the NFL. Staggering for a franchise that is a pillar of the NFL. Firing Mike McCarthy, it seemed as if they were going to keep him when they wouldn't let him, interview for the Bears job. But then four days later, they decide not to renew the out-of-contract coach. And for me, the reason this makes the Cowboys, you can make a cogent argument for getting rid of McCarthy. His record was night and day without Dak Prescott. And well, that's the thing. Like, we saw the drop-off. We saw how much his team dropped off when 13-13 without Dak, 35-22, 36-22 with him. For me, that's forgivable. But when you see the success of the OC and DC, from 2 years ago, Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn and everybody moving on in this team, it's more of an indictment of what should have happened a year ago for the Cowboys, bringing McCarthy back and then making this decision. And Laz, the reason I have the Cowboys as the loser is that they seem to just operate like I am, I guess, apparently on a little bit of a delay. Something's wrong with my internet. But Dak Prescott are we going to renew Dak or not? Wait. You end up paying $6 to $8 million more than you should for him. Same thing with CeeDee Lamb. Ended up costing them $3 to $6 million per annum more because you let other guys get the contract done and continue to raise the market. And then you don't go out and get Derrick Henry when you could have afforded him. But even the price difference, the more what you ended up paying Dak and CeeDee Lamb extra, you could have gotten Derrick Henry for less than that difference. And Jerry Jones, just the continued mismanagement of this franchise, is what's causing this. And he did the same thing now with the head coaching thing. Had he fired McCarthy on Black Monday or made the announcement he wasn't going to renew him, now you're one of the prime spots for some of the chief head coaching candidates who you let interview and be courted by Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, so many other franchises. And now you come late to the party and all they're doing is any advisor to them with any kind of sense is going to say, hey, I know the Cowboys it's got some mystique to it, but I don't know, man. In 2025, the way Jerry Jones runs things, maybe don't go there because we have further evidence that he just continues to tinker and control and drive the franchise into the ground. He's going to keep them in third place in the division at best.
So the reason I'm wearing the colors today, and 1973 vintage. When was the Ice Bowl, Phil? The reason I'm wearing is because they did make the right decision.
67
to part
NFC
ways.
championship game? 68.
To part ways with Mike McCarthy was the right decision. It came a week or so late, 4 days late, however many days you want to say late. Actually, it came multiple years late. But in terms of the 2024,
this year,
result,
7 days late. I think it's fair to say.
For me, it could have changed many years ago.
Yeah,
that decision or that result is the correct one. I agree that the way that this is run is a double dollar sign backwards. They miss out on opportunity. They value attention over efficiency in their process. What's even more frustrating is they are sitting there thinking they're the big winners from this. Why? Because they got to lead ESPN's lead into the game last night and halftime show. We had Troy Aikman talking about it. We had Adam Schefter talking about it. They got to lead the story. Primetime was leaked, or the talk about Prime, Deion Sanders being in contact with Jerry Jones and starting a conversation about the opening as head coach of the Cowboys. The fact that came out during a playoff game, going into studio shows at halftime, not exactly a surprise. They think they're the big winners, and they also think that they're operating off a list that other people aren't when it comes to head coaching candidates. As frustrating it is for someone like me and many other Cowboys fans out there and football neutrals that would love to see just good football operation for good football talent, the likes of Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, is that there's a very big chance that Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson weren't on their list for candidates. They think they're operating off a list that's exclusive to them, and that list might include the likes of Deion Sanders. Whether this is a contract bump ploy for Deion, that's been suggested out there for his the finances at the University of Colorado. That list might include Jason Witten being plucked from high school football in Texas. They think they operate in many ways off a different list. For me, one, that's infuriating from the outside because I think we saw what happened with their list 5 years ago. After holding on to Jason Garrett for too long, the candidates that they went through, Marvin Lewis, Mike McCarthy, does not a coaching search make. That's not adequate. That's not professional. It's not efficient. It doesn't yield the best results. You and me don't get to sit in the rooms. You and me don't get to sit there and go, oh my God, this guy just blew us away with the caliber of motivator, game planning, big picture, organizational understanding that he brings. We know guys are great coordinators. The Ben Johnsons of the world, Todd Monken, Aaron Glenn, run through the names you could go there. Liam Cohen's getting a lot of love. Brady up in
Joe Brady,
Buffalo as well. We know they're great coordinators. That doesn't necessarily make you a great head coach. So things can change and things can be made apparent in those interviews that we don't get. We're not privy to. But what matters to me more than, honestly, in this throughout the process, more than the final decision, is the list you're working off. The list, people giving the Jets a lot of stick because they've got 40 names coming into the building. Well, at least a lot of those names are good and make sense.
And dude, I'll take Mike Tannenbaum's been on record. He frequents the NFL blitz, great football mind, privileged to sit next to him, former GM of the Jets. He and Woody Johnson, owner of the Jets, are posted up in Florida, flying coaches down private. Just, hey, we're going to go through the process. And other people in the room.
I would rather that than a limited process that involves two names, one of which you can raise your eyes about and ask exactly how much of a real interview that was. And you can look into that as I've got the 20-minute warning, Phil, that Chrome's about to shut down on me. So, look, I think, I think the Cowboys have come to the right result in parting ways with Mike McCarthy. It's not just 4 days late. It's not just 1 year late. It's multiple years late for me. But the actual wider process, I agree, that makes some losers on this weekend because once again, when it comes to the process, the football operation, they are valuing attention over efficiency and results.
Laz, I terrific insight. I did hear a few football cliches in there as you went along, but I feel like it was a win for football cliches and a loser for those who are against, right?
It was. I've got the big losers of people who hate football cliches because I tell you what, if you're not about protecting the football in the postseason, you're not about winning. Look at these toss-up games that we had. I mentioned we had the couple games that we could pencil in as a blowout, and it did play out that way when you look at the likes, again, of the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. But the protection of the football from someone named Justin Herbert, the protection of the football of someone named Jordan Love, not a turnover-heavy game, but a crucial fumble up late against the Washington Commanders, and Baker Mayfield throwing that thing on the floor. Well, not throwing. That would be at worst an intentional grounding.
Yeah, Matt Stafford did that perfectly to Puka Nacua, just kind of
that one. A bit of blow up in the ESPN Australia offices or ESPN Sydney offices in the Slack chat yesterday as that play came in. But protecting the football proved so crucial in this game, and it swung contests. I mean, look at the Green Bay. It's not just on Jordan Love, but look at Green Bay. And that opening fumble off the kickoff. And yes, I know Green Bay fans are screaming at me about the contact that was made and helmet to helmet and whether it was actually a fumble, but the ball was put on the ground, which is a problem to start with. I think in all likelihood that was recovered by the Green Bay Packers, but the ball was put on the ground from the very first play. So football cliche lovers, big winners. Those who hate football cliches in particular, it's all about the turnover battle. It's a tough loss for you in the wildcard week.
And Laz, here, regular season, I'll give you the top 6 teams and takeaways in the NFL. Vikings, Steelers, Bills, Packers, Texans, Eagles. All of them are in the playoffs. And I'll go one further with the football cliches. Pass to score, run to win. Here are your top 6 rushing offenses yards per game in the NFL this season. Ravens, Eagles, Commanders, Bucks, Packers, Lions. All 6 in the playoffs. So you have teams that take the ball away, force turnovers, teams that run the ball well. It's a sexy game, orbit motion, all these cool things. There are still fundamentals that hold true. Cliches are cliches because they have an air of truth about them. We're seeing that. We saw it in the regular season, as I just pointed out, and we saw it in the wild card round, as you mentioned.
Cliches might be something that are aging well, but perhaps getting a little cold, and they're lacking freshness. Something that doesn't lack freshness, Phil, obviously, is the Hot Take Hotline, brought to you by McDonald's. And we have a couple lined up. We've also had a couple of late entries, which I will surprise you with shortly. But the first one off here is the Rams absolutely want to crack at Detroit after Dan Campbell. The Dan Campbell moment. We'll see you in 2 weeks. So they will show up in Philly. That pairs nicely well with a write-in that we just had. And I'm just going to the socials to get that. Which team in the divisional round is most likely to implode if they lose this week? And why is it Philadelphia? That's from Chad. Yeah. So the opening question was from John Corbett. And then the follow-up that pairs nicely there, nice little wine pairing from Chad Ryan. Phil, the Rams about to turn up, cause another upset of bigger proportion. They're outside. Last I checked on Tab Markets, they were outside $3 to win against the Philadelphia Eagles. We're seeing Matthew Stafford with his heavy neck and mutton chop area of his stubble graying is almost looking like an aging teen wolf, just with the way that it's not very strong here. See, we all have our different strengths with our facial hair. Some are stronger here, some are stronger here. Unfortunately, there's the Andrew Luck strain, which is very strong in the neck beard area. Matthew Stafford it's all out here and under here, seemingly, and adding a little salt in there as well. Are the Rams about to cause Philadelphia chaos and turn up motivated by being discounted as kind of a middling team by the one win through the first month or so of the season that we saw in the regular season, and motivated by the fact that Dan Campbell is waiting for them perhaps in the NFC title game after discarding them offhand as a week 1 bye for the Vikings?
Yeah, Laz, I mean, I'll start with that point. The Rams will try and use it as bulletin board material. It's not as bad as the Rex Ryan bye week comment that motivated the Texans against the Chargers. I know what Dan Campbell was doing there. He seems like a nice guy. Like, not all coaches are nice guys. I think we could say that. Dan Campbell seems like a nice guy. So does Kevin O'Connell. I haven't spoken to either of them directly. They just seem like they're well-liked. You see them pregame, like Matt LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell, chummy. Hey, no, don't talk to Aaron Jones. He's my friend now. Like, that is not how things operated in coaches of yesteryear. There seems to be a lot of just mutual respect, especially in that NFC North triumvirate. So I think that was Dan Campbell saying to Kevin O'Connell, a way of saying, like, hey, you've got a good team, good game. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Shake his hand. That whole thing. That was not looking past the Rams. But while we're here, Sean McVay is going to use every tool he can to motivate a team that started off as this young defense who just seemed like they were going to get overwhelmed. And just like last year, since their bye, they have hit their stride. They've won 9 of 12. There's a world out there where the Rams, I will say, pre-playoffs and still now, the Eagles are my Super Bowl pick. I picked them to win the Super Bowl this year. With the way they run the ball, the way this defense has been playing, whether you want to use EPA per play allowed, yards per play allowed, whatever, defense is playing terrifically from the spine to the back end, the ability to run the ball. They are my pick.
People note that he hasn't mentioned the quarterback.
An omission. Every no team's perfect out there. Detroit, KC, Buffalo, but none of them are perfect.
You're perfect.
Jalen Hurts, if he wins a game, it'll be with his legs, I think, or just chucking it up to AJ Brown. But there's a world where, just like we saw yesterday, not even 24 hours ago, Matt Stafford opens the game, matriculating the ball down the field, 7 plays, 65 yards, touchdown. And then Philly goes out, Jalen Hurts has one of his patented interceptions, or Hurts, who holds onto the ball an average of 3.14 seconds against that D-line that just sacked Sam Darnold 9 times, who was holding onto the ball too long. Turnover, that kind of thing. If that becomes an avalanche, and we're looking up at the end of the game and it's 31-13, I think it was it Chad in the right end? So I think Chad is absolutely right in that. Philly, you and I have talked about it on the show. Philly has changed everything with that team. OCDC, midseason, postseason, new OCDC, everything all along the way. You've committed the money to Jalen Hurts. It's going to fall on Nick Sirianni if it all falls apart, especially with how he's interacted with, yelling at the Bird Gang and all that. Despite Philly playing so well through the lion's share of the season, there's a world out there where if they get blown out at home, and the Rams are way better than we give them credit for because of how slow they started, how injured they were at wide receiver early in the year. They're a very good team. Dude, the Rams could well be in the Super Bowl. I mean, I'll go out and say it. I think the winner of this game, LA Philly, is your NFC Super Bowl representative.
Woo, spicy. We've got Chad, another Chad. No, definitely the same Chad. I agree. Chad is correct and very handsome. For me, this one's going to be fascinating because of the 9 sacks against that Vikings defensive line. And that was the Vikings offensive line and the Rams defensive line. That was a story the last time these two teams played when Darisaw went down and that Rams defense got to pressuring Sam Darnold and disrupting that offense again. This is a very different beast in the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. That pass rush is the strength of that Rams defense. I have to think that, and we might touch on this in just a little bit, I have to think that Kellen Moore, Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, the Eagles' brains trust are looking at that performance from the Rams and going, we can't have Jalen sit back there.
No.
The ball needs to be coming out. I know A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith can stretch
handoff, screens.
Yeah. We'll touch on how that might play in just a moment. But what I'm looking there is really, it is a different matchup. It's a different tier of matchup. Who wins out there? And equally, look, this is just quickly, we talked way back when we were kind of planting flags on teams when we were handing out gifts, remember? Handing out early Christmas gifts. Who can turn the dials? We were begging the Rams, hey, turn that play action, under center, dial up, get Matthew Stafford faking, dropping back and slinging that thing. And he was absolutely exceptional, piecing apart the blitz, piecing apart zone defenses that he was up against. It was a phenomenal showing from Matthew Stafford, who even just the post-game interview, from the first I've been here before energy from that opening drive to the post-game interview, it was just statesmanly. It was He is the veteran QB in the NFC side of things. I need to check the math. Is he the veteran QB in the whole of the playoffs left? Is he the oldest quarterback? I think he might be the oldest quarterback left in this.
He was.
Lamar, Patrick. Yeah. Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen. I've got the 10-minute warning now, so we are speeding things up here. He's the veteran statesman when it comes to the quarterback position, and he's carrying that gravitas. The big leagues has a hot take hotline coming in. Christopher Laurie, are the Dallas Cowboys still quote-unquote rooted? Cheers. Yes, we're at the start. Thankfully, the Australian interpretation of that made its way to the Dallas beat. And we had some great reporters likes of Shreen Williams coming across that one. Nick Harris, who does some great work over there. When that rooted shirt was out there and the mantra was set. And talk about self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, last one here for a rapid-fire edition of the Hot Take Hotline. That was a double scoop, even a triple scoop. The Super Bowl is this weekend, so get your popcorn ready from John Roberts in reference to the MVP 1 versus MVP 2 showdown. Bills hosting the Ravens. Phil, you've just gone on and said you think the winner of the Eagles-Rams is going to be, it's going to be your NFC champion and going to the Super Bowl?
Yeah,
yes,
I
is
think
the winner of Ravens Bills not just your AFC champion, but your Super Bowl champion? Too hot, just hot enough.
no, I'm
More
still sticking
tobacco?
with I'm still sticking with the Eagles for they could again very well lose this weekend. A lot to like
Mhm.
about Buffalo and Baltimore. I don't think there's much to take away from that Week 4 game that the Ravens ran all over the Bills because the Bills are without Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Teron Johnson, Taylor Rapp. There were 4 players on their defensive back end against a team that likes to run the ball. Very intriguing game. I'm on the Bills to win that game. I'm on the Bills to reach the Super Bowl from the AFC. But Laz, I do see a take from Jason King saying at least 3 road teams will win.
Yep.
I'm going chalk home teams, not chalk because one's an underdog, but I think home teams go 4-0 this weekend. I'm on Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Lions.
I have Lions, Ravens, Chiefs, Rams. So I just picked 1 road team, 2 road teams, 2 road teams.
Rams.
I got 2.
And the Rams could. Rams Eagles was my NFC Championship game because I had the Bucks winning, and then I had the Rams beating the Lions, Eagles beating the Bucks, and then Eagles over Rams in the NFC Championship game. But that's what I'm saying. I'm still sticking with this as an NFC Championship game, though. The winner's likely going to have to go to Detroit and get a win. Not easy. But yeah, Super Bowl this weekend. What I will say, best game of the season so far. Bills.
Oh.
And the second game of the season is second best game of the season is Rams Eagles the day before. So we have that's why so many people peg this as the best day of the year or the best weekend of the year. I see somebody's not a fan of the Saturday games, and I needed to digest because I couldn't do 4 of these in a row. So give me 2 and then 2. I booked my flights to KC around being able to watch all this because it's going to be so good. All right, Laurie's computer's about to explode, everybody. So fingers and ears, cartoon style. We will see you, ESPN, NFL, Oz, NZ, socials, and on NFL Blitz. We tape that tomorrow. Chat soon. Enjoy the games.